Here we're going to learn about adding integers, and adding integers is different than adding whole numbers because now we have the concept of a negative number. So just because of that, we're going to learn a different way to add numbers together. So one of the easiest ways to add integers is adding through the number line. So let's talk about that a little bit, adding integers through the number line. And although we won't be able to always use this method because we have to be able to do this in our heads later on, it's a good idea to visualize it while we're starting off, just so we get an idea of what's happening behind the scenes. So let's just take an example. Let's say we're trying to add -6 and -2. We're trying to add those two numbers together. So what we're going to do is we're going to visualize what's happening on the number line. So the first thing you can do is you can plot the first number on the number line. So let's plot -6 over here. So here's -6, here would be -5, -4, -7, -8, -9, -10. So here's -6 right here. So this is going to be our starting point. And then we're going to add to -6 -2. And remember that a negative sign means that we're going to go left in the number line. So we're going to add -2 to -6. And we're going to end up at -8. So -6 plus -2 is going to be -8. And we did that on the number line. It's kind of like a game. You start with -6, you add -2 to that, and you end up at -8. Let's try another example on adding on the number line. So let's say we want to take -8 and add to -8 3. So we're going to draw a number line, draw our -8, which is going to be right here. Let me draw the numbers around it too. Okay, so here's -8. That's our starting point. I'm just going to write an S for start. Then we're going to go 3 units to the right because it's a +3. So 3 units to the right would land us right here. This is our ending point. So here's -8 plus 3. Our ending point is -5. So that's how we add on the number line. And you should always think about this method in the back of your head, although we're not always going to draw a number line. Okay, so now that we know what adding integers looks like, let's write down some rules for adding integers. Okay, so there are two cases we're going to look at. Case 1 is going to be when there are two numbers we're adding, and both numbers have the same sign. So a good example of that, and I'm going to write example on the right, is like that example we did up above with -6 plus -2. Two numbers, and both numbers have the same sign. They're both negative in this case. So here's what we're going to do. Step 1 is we are going to add their absolute values. So let's do that really quick. Let's figure out what the absolute value of -6 is. That would be 6. And what the absolute value of -2 is. That would be 2. So we are going to add their absolute values. So I'm going to add 6 and 2, and I'm going to get 8. So I'm done with step 1. Step 2 says the sign of the original numbers is the sign of the answer. So because both numbers were originally negative, our answer is going to be negative. So our answer is a -8. And again, that makes some sense. Just think back to the number line. If you had -6 and then you went -2 to the left, you all of a sudden have a -8. Another way to think about these problems is think of them as money. If you were $6 overdrawn, and then you're overdrawn an additional $2, all of a sudden you're overdrawn a total of $8 in your bank account. So that's case 1, where we have two numbers, same sign. And I can give you some positive numbers to try that with as well. But now let's look at the second case, where we have two numbers, and the two numbers have a different sign. So an example of that would be, let's say that we're adding, like the B example that we had above, we're adding negative 8 plus 3. Here we have two numbers, negative 8 and 3, and they had different signs. Negative 8 is negative, 3 is positive. So here's what our steps are going to be. Step 1 is going to be to find the largest absolute value minus the smallest absolute value. Okay, so let's just figure out the absolute values before we worry about which one's bigger. So the absolute value of negative 8 is 8. The absolute value of 3 is 3. So which is bigger, 8 or 3? And it turns out that 8 is bigger. So we're going to take the bigger absolute value minus the smaller absolute value. So 8 minus 3. That's going to give us 5. Then what we're going to do, step 2, is we're going to use the sign of the number with the larger absolute value. For our answer. So in this case, we look at 8 and 3. 8 was larger, so what was the sign of 8 before we took the absolute value? It was negative. So our answer is going to be negative in this case. And again, that makes some sense if you think about it as money. If you owe $8 and then you pay off $3, you're still going to owe $5. So that's why it's a negative 5 and not a positive 5. So always think of it as money and it'll help you out. So now that we know the general idea and the rules behind adding integers, let's go ahead and try some examples. So example A, let's say we have negative 12 plus negative 30. So what we have here is we have two numbers with the same sign, a negative and a negative. So we're going to use the first rules that we learned, two numbers, same sign. So we're going to use the first rule. We're going to add their absolute values together. So let's figure out their absolute values. So the absolute value of negative 12 is 12. The absolute value of negative 30 is 30. So we're going to add them together. When we add 12 and 30, we get 42. Then we are going to take the sign of both numbers to be the sign of our answer. Because both numbers were negative, our answer is going to be negative. We can think about it like money. If we owe $12 and then we owe an additional $30, we're going to owe a total of $42. So let's try another one. Let's say we have 9 plus 4. That should be easy because it's two positive numbers. We've done two whole numbers before, but let's just do it using this method. So step 1, we take the absolute value of both numbers. That's 9 and 4. We add them together. We get 13, and the sign of our answer is the sign of the numbers. So the numbers were both positive, so our answer is going to be positive 13. Okay, so say we have now negative 1 plus 6. Here we have two numbers, different sign. So two numbers, different sign is the second set of rules. So step 1 says to find the largest absolute value minus the smallest absolute value. So the absolute value of negative 1 would be 1. The absolute value of 6 would be 6. 6 is bigger than 1, so we're going to take the largest absolute value minus the smallest absolute value. That's going to give us 5. So that gives us our numerical answer. Now we want to know the sign of our answer. So we're going to use the sign of the number with the larger absolute value for our answer. The larger number was 6, which was positive, so our answer is going to be positive 5. I'll give you some other problems for you to try out, and they should not be very difficult, even though they'll have more numbers on them. So try the following. Example D, 2 plus negative 8. Example E, we'll have 6 plus negative 2 plus negative 15. That's a 15. In example F, we'll have 5 plus negative 3 plus 12 plus negative 14. So with these problems where you have more than one number that you're adding together, you can use the order of operations and do it from left to right if you want to. That might be easier. Another thing you can do is you can add up all the positive numbers and then subtract all the negative numbers. So you can try it either way. Both ways you should get the correct answer. Before we go off into another topic, let's just quickly talk about evaluating algebraic expressions. Alright, so let's try the following examples where we have to evaluate. The first example is we're going to evaluate x plus 3y when x is negative 6 and y is positive 2. So the easiest thing to do is before you plug in the x and the y, wherever you saw an x, put in parentheses, and wherever you saw y, put in parentheses. So essentially anywhere you saw the variables, just put in parentheses. So we're going to plug in negative 6 for x, so wherever I have the parentheses for x, I'm going to put in a negative 6. And we're going to put in a 2 for y, so wherever I had a y, I'm going to put in a 2. So what I have is I have an order of operations problem, and I have to choose between adding negative 6 and 3 together or multiplying 3 and 2 together. And according to the order of operations, I have to multiply first. So I'm going to multiply 3 and 2, that's going to give me 6. And everything else is going to come straight down. It's going to be negative 6 plus 6. According to the order of operations, all I have left to do is to add these two numbers together. I have a negative number plus a positive number. And I can do this in my head. Negative 6 plus 6, if I owe $6 and then I pay back the $6, I'm going to owe $0, but I'm also not going to have any money, so my answer is 0. You can also think about it on the number line. So here would be negative 6, negative 5, negative 4, negative 3, 2, 1, and 0. So I start at negative 6, so this is my starting point. I move 6 to the right, and I end up at 0. Let's try another one. Let's evaluate x plus y when x equals negative 13 and y equals negative 9. So the easiest thing to do is to, wherever you see an x and wherever you see a y, put in parentheses and then plug in your numbers. So because x was negative 13, I'm going to put a negative 13 in here. And because y is negative 9, I'm going to put in a negative 9 in here. So what you have here is you have the addition of two numbers, same sign. So two numbers, same sign, the rules say I'm going to add up their absolute values. So I'm just going to add up 13 and 9. That gives me 22. And then the sign of my answer is going to be the sign of both numbers. Both numbers were negative, so my answer is going to be negative 22. Again, that makes some sense. Let's double check, make sure this makes sense. If I owe $13 and then I owe an additional $9, I'm going to owe a total of $22. So my answer should indeed be negative.